stairwell I got high. Clear. Moving. Okay, next shot. Top of the stairs. Gotta get up there quick. Move. Get the door. Get the door.
Ready to die, bitch?
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am very, very grateful. Please do check me out on Rumble and X. They do not censor me there. They absolutely shadow ban me on YouTube. So check the other places, particularly in an election year. Shadow banning and censoring is going to pick up rather than reduce during this year. Also, if you want to check out how you can support GunGuyTV, you can do that by going to GunGuyTVcrew.org, O-R-G, GunGuyTVcrew.org. Or you can go on Patreon or Locals and just search for Gun Guy TV. You can join there, and you'll get all kinds of exclusive content you can't get anywhere else. All right, I'm going to talk to Chuck Michel here in just a minute from CRPA, the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Chuck is also the head of the Second Amendment Law Center and the one of the founding partners, if not the founding partner, I think, at Michel & Associates, fighting for your rights in courts all over the country, and including in California. Lots of things to talk about, so let's go talk to Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a while since we talked, man, and I got to be honest with you, I've been so busy, I have not kept up on what's going on with court cases, but you are the great Swami Shaboom of Second Amendment court cases, brother. So help us out. What's happening? We're knee-deep in them.
Well, the action is, the game's afoot. The action... that everybody's watching most closely, I guess, is the Supreme Court. There are a number of cases that have asked the Supreme Court to grant review. The way the process works is the Supreme Court holds conferences every week or so amongst the 9 judges, and they decide what cases that have asked them to grant a petition for cert and review them, what cases they're going to take, what cases they're not going to take, and what they might do otherwise with some of these cases. So from the Second Amendment perspective, there were several cases that were discussed among the justices last Thursday, among them Bianchi, which was the Massachusetts semi-auto ban, and I think 3, maybe even 4 Illinois cases over the Illinois semi-auto ban. There's also the Antonok case, which is the New York case where they over-designated pretty much every place as a sensitive place where your CCW is invalid. So they had a conference last Thursday, and this morning we got rulings on the cases that they had discussed. The Bianchi case in Massachusetts, they denied cert. So that case goes back down. It was a petition for cert before judgment, significantly. So that case goes back down to the lower court where it will continue to be litigated. And it may or may not get additional guidance from the Supreme Court in the other Illinois semi-auto cases that the Supreme Court considered last Thursday as well. But rather than making a decision today, making a decision last Thursday and issuing that decision today, they relisted those Illinois cases, which means they are going to discuss them some more this Thursday. And then we're going to get another order from the Supreme Court that reflects what they decide this Thursday. We'll see that order next Monday.
Okay.
So last Thursday, they had a conference on all the Second Amendment
Monday, we'll
cases.
know what the heck they did.
Today is Monday. We heard that they did not decide what to do with the Illinois cases, but they did decide to deny cert in the Massachusetts case.
The Massachusetts case was the assault weapons weird.
Bianchi, the semi-auto bans. Yeah.
Okay. And now, so you mentioned, I just want to make sure for clarity, because, not an attorney here, and I don't play one on TV or YouTube. You said that they denied cert prior to judgment. So does that mean that the request for the Supreme Court to hear the case was a request to hear it before the lower court had made a judgment? Is that what that means?
So yes, and that's a good question. There's a number of different ways, or a number of different, I should say, procedural postures a case can be in when it goes up and asks the Supreme Court to take a case. The Supreme Court seems to favor, generally, a case that has actually got a judgment. Now, remember, when you file a case, especially in a Second Amendment case, you file your complaint, and then typically we move for a preliminary injunction blocking the enforcement of the law. That can be appealed, whether it's granted or not. The loser can appeal that. It's called an interlocutory appeal, which means it's an appeal from an injunction request, but before the judgment in the final case. Typically, if you file a case, you move for preliminary injunction, it's granted or denied. You then move for a permanent injunction and judgment, and then that would wrap up the case in the trial court at the trial court level. But at the stage where you move for a preliminary injunction and get denied, you can do that interlocutory appeal. Or you can ask the Supreme Court to hear that interlocutory appeal. It goes from the district court to the Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit or whatever, and then to the Supreme Court. They take interlocutory appeals, but not as often as they take cases that have reached the final judgment. So a number of these cases were up on interlocutory appeals. But some, it was just a petition for writ of certiorari before judgment. That's what's the Bianchi case. So they don't really have the same procedural posture in the Massachusetts case that they do in the Illinois cases, which is why it's not.
So the fact that they took this or chose not to take this is not a reflection of what they think of the case then. It's just they're letting it go through the process. Does that sound
right? But
fair?
also the issues in all of the so-called assault weapon cases, the issues are the same. And the
wait a minute. How many assault weapons cases are there?
Oh, I think there's Oregon, Massachusetts, Illinois, California. I'm probably missing several.
Okay, well, my point is that gun owners don't need to get their knickers in a knot at the moment because the Supreme Court decided
all the
not to
issues,
take this.
all the issues
Okay.
that would have been addressed in Bianchi are going to be addressed. And so, if we win the Illinois cases, if the Supreme Court takes them, either now or in the future, those cases will be the precedent that can be used in the Bianchi case and any other assault weapon case that's not before the Supreme Court right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that, because you were going too fast for my pea brain. Sorry about that. I appreciate the clarification.
But keep one thing in mind, just to confuse you a little bit more.
Okay.
We don't necessarily need the Supreme Court to take a case on semi-autos. We need the Supreme Court to take a case, some kind of a Second Amendment case, and set the record straight on what the Bruen test is, what the methodology is, how courts are supposed to apply the Bruen standard in evaluating the constitutionality of any gun control law, whether it's semi-autos or magazines or prohibited places or prohibited people. And we may get some guidance out of Rahimi, which is the case that the Supreme Court has. It's pending a decision. They've heard it. It's been orally argued. They're writing their opinion, and it will be coming down in June. Now, that's a narrow issue on whether or not a guy who's got a restraining order can be prohibited from possessing firearms. And he's a dangerous guy. He's
by all reports, Rahimi's not a good dude.
No. So I think we're going to probably lose.
He's like
the battle.
Corn Pop. He's a bad dude. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I should have done it. Anyway, I apologize.
But I think in that one, we're going to lose. Getting back on track here, Joel. I know.
Yes,
it's
thank you
Monday
so very
morning.
much. I know I had to do
Have
something
you
funny.
Get
What the
another
heck?
coffee there, brother.
Yes.
I know. So Rahimi's a very narrow case. It's about whether this guy with a restraining order can be prohibited from owning a gun, or whether everybody with a restraining order can be prohibited from owning a gun. So that's the classification problem, that you can just pick any demonized political subclass and ban them from possessing firearms, like patriots or MAGA supporters. So
we're less concerned about Mr. Rahimi than we are about the fact that the court may take this as an opportunity to clarify
set the record
some
straight on what the
issues.
test is. And that would apply in every Second Amendment case, no matter whether it's semi-automatics or magazines or CCW legitimacy, where, sensitive places, because the courts are twisting the Bruen decision and turning it into something that it is not, so that they can try and uphold some gun control laws that they like. They try and make the Second Amendment textual test more complicated than it is. They want to say that magazines are not arms, so they're not protected by the Second Amendment, or semi-autos are not protected arms. That's not the question. Every bearable arm and any conduct relating to it is protected by the Second Amendment. So semi-autos, full autos, they're all bearable arms. They're all covered by the text. That doesn't mean they can't be regulated necessarily, because you go to the second step, which is whether or not there's some historical tradition which would indicate that the founding fathers at the time of the ratification would have accepted a gun law like this, like the modern day law. But that's not what they're doing. They're first of all, they're looking at.
Well, they're not doing that because there are no analogous laws really half the time. They keep going back to how many times they have to write Bowie knife in a brief.
That's a good example. So they're saying, that the way that sometimes they wouldn't allow a Bowie knife into a certain, bar. And so that means that you can ban all semi-automatics everywhere. That they stretch that historical analog way beyond. It's not an analog. It's a totally different law, but they will stretch to make it fit because they want to uphold the law. So if the Supreme Court says, hey, everything's covered by that text, that's not where you get bogged down. Now you got to move to historical analog, and it's got to be a true historical analog. It can't just be some one-off knife law that justifies the ban on all semi-autos. Then the lower courts should get that message and change the way they're approaching these cases.
The operative word.
But in the meantime, you've got three
right?
Illinois cases. Huh?
I said the operative word being should. I mean, let's face it.
Yes. I mean,
no matter what the Supreme Court does, the lower courts are going to try to play games with it. But this is about making it more challenging and more difficult by narrowing as much as possible the games they can play, isn't it? I mean, because they're not going to stop playing games.
The Supreme Court needs to call out the lower courts and specifically cite the things that they've been doing and say, that's wrong. That's not how you're supposed to do it. So if they do that in Rahimi, that's going to help in every case. Now, in the meantime, you've got those three Illinois cases, which they're going to I think it's three, it might be four, which they're going to discuss on Thursday. And then we're going to hear on Monday whether they've accepted those cases or carried them over again. And they could, if Rahimi is going to be a very well fleshed out opinion, they might do what they did with some of the cases that were petitioning for cert before Bruen came down. They held those cases until the Bruen decision came down, and then they granted review on all those cases. They vacated the lower court decision and they remanded it back down. They didn't hear it in the Supreme Court. They said, hey, lower court, your decision is wiped out. Now you got to come up with a new decision based on what we just said in Rahimi. In Bruen. So they could do the same thing. They could hold these Illinois cases and any other cases they have. They could just hold them until Rahimi comes down. When Rahimi comes down, they could say, all these decisions are wrong. You now need to reconsider them in light of Rahimi. Now, I'm probably putting a little too much hope in Rahimi. I think that's going to be a narrow decision. They know that, though. They know one way or the other. So if they think it's going to be a, very thorough decision, they may just hold the Illinois cases until it comes down and then send them back down. If it's not going to be, then they might take one of those Illinois cases as an opportunity to really set the record straight in the semi-auto case instead of in the Rahimi prohibited person case.
Well, it sounds to me like you're pretty confident that their desire is to set the record straight regardless, whichever vehicle
at some point they are. Well, I mean, look, they have to. They're being ignored. Okay, there's 6 judges on that court at least who don't want to tolerate that. They may not. They know, Roberts and who knows exactly where the other 5 conservative judges are coming from. They seem to be on the side of the Second Amendment, but they're all on the side of, you got to respect what we say. We're the Supreme Court. You're inferior courts. You're twisting our words. You're not really accepting our rulings in good faith. And so that's disrespect. I mean, I got to think that especially some of the judges like Alito and Thomas are tired of this crap. They put up with it for 12 years after Heller. I mean,
which brings up an interesting question. I mean, how much authority is probably not the right word. What power does the Supreme Court have, does the Chief Justice have over these lower courts, absent coming up with a different decision and hoping they follow that one? I mean, if the lower courts are going to continue to completely ignore the Supreme Court and do what they darn well please, then no matter what the Supreme Court does, the lower courts are going to ignore the Supreme Court and do what they darn well please, unless there's some mechanism to hold those individual judges who do this stuff to task. Is there some punishment for doing this kind of stuff?
Primarily, it's just accepting the case and overturning the decision and sending it back down. So technically, the Supreme Court has some disciplinary authority over lower courts, and lower courts have, courts of appeal have some disciplinary authority within themselves. There's all kinds of judicial misconduct processes. And at some point, what the Ninth Circuit is doing, for example, may rise to that level. Because they're just so blatantly ignoring things and playing where they take a case en banc that shouldn't need to be en banc. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in how the Supreme Court or courts can discipline their own judges, but the easiest way for the Supreme Court to do it is take the case and overturn the decision.
Which then brings up the other question. You and I have talked about this before, but I know it comes up in the comments all the time, so it's probably worth touching on. Let's say, for example, the court does what it did before. It takes all these assault weapons cases, it decides one, or it clarifies the rules, and then it wipes the others out, sends them back to the lower court, and said, okay, come up with a new decision based upon this. How many times can that bounce up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down? Because I know gun owners get very frustrated thinking that case is never going to get decided because it's going to continue to go up and come down and come up.
That is. Yeah, that's a problem. And I mean, Don Kilmer just did a great law review article about the games that courts play en banc and talked about some of the things that Justice Reinhart, who used to be on the Ninth Circuit before he passed away, used to say about how the Supreme Court can't catch them all. He would just ignore Supreme Court precedent, blatantly and do what he wanted to do. And that's why the Ninth Circuit was the most overturned circuit in the country. It still is the most overturned circuit in the country. But he's like, well, they can't catch them all. So this is like judicial defiance in some levels. So yes, they can play the game and drag it out. And there is a long game being played by the gun ban lobby. They hope Biden wins. They hope a couple of the justices have to step down during a second Biden administration, and they get to get rid of some of the, older judges who are on the conservative side.
You made okay, so I'm going to ask you to get political here. I apologize. I know you're the legal beagle, but you just mentioned something I think which is of critical importance. We really have what it comes down to now for president is Trump, Biden. That's it. Yeah. Pick one of the two. You may hate both. You may hate one or the other. Whatever. I mean, whatever your opinion is. You might have hoped that there'd be somebody else other than one or the other. The truth is, it's one or the other. That's where it's at. So that being said, Trump just did his rather rambling speech to the NRA. I tried watching it all. I just didn't have time. I was waiting for him to get to the point, and he sort of never did. What are your thoughts on him? I mean, he's got his appointment of judges has helped us a lot. But then, of course, he threw the bump stock, under the bus, and he did some other things people get mad about. And his statement a long time ago about let's take the guns and due process later on, which of course he can't do.
Yeah, he said
what are your thoughts on him?
He's.
I mean, with regard to our Second Amendment rights is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about
you're not going to get any better. You're not going to get any better. Now, can he be reasoned with on some of the stuff that he went off the rails on a little bit? Yes. But you're not going to get any better than him. His policies, not just on guns, on everything, are clearly superior to Biden. Now, I don't particularly like Trump as a person. He's aggravating.
He's very definitely abrasive, that's for sure.
Abrasive is the word.
Yeah.
And he picks fights that he doesn't need to pick. He gets down in the mud and you wrestle with a pig, the pig likes it. But Biden, come on. I mean, every policy is extremist gun control policies. And not only that, the open border. Come on, it's just the policy choices are night and day. Don't even vote for the individual. Vote for the policy that the individual's administration will put into place. And all of the administrative policies that the previous Trump administration had in place are way far better for this country. Look, we're in a battle for the soul of this country. Some people want us to be a socialist country. They want free stuff, and they don't want to work for it. Now, that's not to say that we don't need to give opportunities to folks to succeed in life, but they have to have a little bit of self-motivation and ambition. You don't just get given a handout for nothing.
Well, I think when I was growing up, you and I are roughly the same age, and when we were growing up, I always learned that this country gave everybody equal opportunity, but it was a guarantee of equal opportunity, really, but not a guarantee of equal result.
Right.
You had to grab the opportunity and run with it and work hard and do your thing, and I think there's so many people that want an equality of result.
And here's
without
a little
necessarily
surprise for
doing
you.
anything, and it's not going to work.
Socialism doesn't get you anything guaranteed either.
No. Well, yeah, sure it does. Poverty, because the guy at the top is rich and you're poor. It's been repeated in country after country around the nation. So, yeah, it guarantees you something, but not what you're thinking. That's for sure. Well, I tend to agree. Honestly, Trump doesn't bother me that much. When he rambles and I'm in a hurry, I'd like him to get to the point.
Yeah.
I just look at him and go, and the guy's from Queens. Okay, he's a guy from Queens, and so I give him a lot of, leeway because I realize where he's from, and folks from New York can be abrasive, and that's part of the culture. It's part of the culture. And if you're from California or if you're from someplace else where that grates on you, well, just got to realize that the country's not. It's not homogenous. It's people are different in different parts of the country. He's from Queens, and that's the way they are. Some of them, and that's okay. I mean, that's fine.
But as far as the Second Amendment's concerned, there is no choice. There's no other choice.
I don't think so either. I was curious if you felt the same way.
No, come on. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, Kennedy, but that's just a distraction anyway. And he's not good either. So,
no, he wouldn't be good for the Second Amendment at all. People say that he would be, but he historically.
But the thing is, now this is a critical election, and that's been said a bunch of times throughout our history. But it's very, very true. I mean, we've got these. Jesus, people are supporting Hamas,
right?
A terrorist group. I mean, the spin that's going on, and the psych games, the psyops that's being played on the American people. But there is a group of folks who are social engineers funded by a couple of billionaires who think they know how people should live their lives, and they want us to be a more socialist country where, you do what the government, you live the life the government tells you to live rather than choosing an individual journey for yourself. I mean, it's scary.
Yes,
and guns are the tip of the spear, but they're not the only issue.
And they don't want you to talk about it either, which is why, if you're watching this right now, you should be watching it on X or Rumble. I encourage you to go over there and subscribe to both.
Are they shadow banning you on YouTube?
Yes, they've shadow banned me for years. And if they don't like the video, it gets squashed and the view count goes down. And, the previous video I did on something like that, it's got 70,000 views, and this one gets 5,000 because all of a sudden you go, okay, come on, somebody put a brick on my head here, and they don't want anybody to see it. I've had a lot of users. So X, Rumble. All right, back to the legal beagle stuff. What kind of cases have we got going on in the state of California, which is kind of the state of confusion at the same time?
Well, we've CRPA's got a lot. We've got the gun ban, the gun show ban, which was argued in the Ninth Circuit. We've got the minor marketing ban against marketing firearms and firearm related events to minors. There's an injunction in place on that, so that's pretty much a win. Not quite over yet, but it's a win. We've got the Duncan magazine capacity limitation, which is in the Ninth Circuit en banc. We've got the Rhodey ammunition background check decision, which was a win in the district court, which is now in the Ninth Circuit, and stuck behind Duncan. There's a lot of cases in the Ninth Circuit that are stuck behind Duncan, which is what happened before Bruen came down too. Duncan was out in the lead, and the en banc opinion was what decided what was going to happen in the other case, and that's why they were all sent back down to Judge Benitez.
So we might have a sunnier result out of all of those at the Ninth Circuit, provided the Supreme Court takes Rahimi or one of these other cases real quick and then clarifies the test.
Yes, because remember in Duncan, we lost 7-5. So if we change two minds, or I should say if the Supreme Court changes two minds
Yeah.
by virtue of an opinion, either faithfully applying the Bruen decision or some more guidance coming out of Rahimi, that should bode well for us. In the meantime, in the Ninth Circuit, though, some panels are getting it. Like a panel of judges just struck down the ban on nonviolent felons from possessing firearms. Nonviolent felons.
Yeah.
And so some of the panels are getting it right. You had the Teeter panel, which was interesting. That was the butterfly knives case, I believe.
Yeah. Well, and then I think the governor of Hawaii just signed a bill making it legal to purchase, possess, and carry various and sundry implements.
Because they didn't want that decision to go up. They wanted to wipe out the precedent.
Yeah.
It's like what New York did on the CCW. Washington, D.C. did on the CCW. They started issuing rather than take it up to the Supreme Court and lose.
Yeah.
So that is part of the gamesmanship that's going on here. They're trying to moot wins by repealing of the law, which is interesting because it tells you they never cared about the damn law to begin with.
Right. Okay. And then I think the other thing, too, is that all they're doing is delaying the inevitable, provided we don't end up with Biden as president again and he gets to replace a justice or two or keeps planting these crazy, wonky federal judges where there's availabilities around the country. So that's the other reason why that election is super important.
Yeah, I mean, the Ninth Circuit is total. The composition has changed dramatically thanks to the previous Trump administration.
Yeah. And so what's going on with SB 2? That's one. And the other is there a challenge? I think there's a challenge somewhere by somebody with regard to the fact that California does not honor permits from any other state, isn't there?
Well, that's our case.
Well, there you go. Okay.
There's
So
a couple cases.
what's going on with those? Because I get that question in class all the time.
So we have a lawsuit against the LA County Sheriff because they're taking too long to process applications. They're not accepting out-of-state applicants, and in Laverne, they're charging $1,000 for a 2-year CCW permit. So that litigation is active, and we're seeking a preliminary injunction. We're just waiting for a hearing date. That's still in the district court.
All right. So what's going on with SB?
What's going to happen on CCW is there's going to be a ton of minuscule issues now. They're going to play so many games. It's going to be like if you ever had a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, can they revoke your CCW? It's going to be that kind of gamesmanship. But the central issues.
Wow. Job security for attorneys, I think, if nothing else. You guys are busy. What's going on with SB 2? Is that even a thing? I mean, part of it is enforceable, part of it isn't, kind of a deal?
That's the sensitive places case, and that's been argued in the Ninth Circuit. The law has been enjoined preliminarily, and now we got to see what the Ninth Circuit 3-judge panel does.
Did we have a good panel or a bad panel?
Not really. No.
Okay, so that's one that's obviously going to go to the Supreme Court if they'll take it.
Right.
There are other examples of that in other states, though, aren't there?
Yes, that's the Antonic case in New York. There's some others, but that's the sensitive. The Hawaii, but that's Ninth Circuit. These are sensitive places. Look, the Bloomberg's lawyers at Everytown Law looked at what happened with Bruen. They said, here's how we can twist this, and then they started exporting these arguments to all the liberal attorney generals in the deep blue states, Illinois, California, New York. But they also came up with ways to tinker around the edges and come up with all these other new laws that restrict your right, although not as direct. Cool. The big one that people are worried about is the 11% excise tax, and I do want to say something about that one. We want to file a lawsuit challenging that. That's going to be like another tax line on your receipt from a gun store. But it's not as simple as a poll tax case. It's a little more complicated because there's a body of law that says before you can challenge a tax, you have to pay the tax. And the tax goes into effect on July. Now, the National Shooting Sports Foundation would like very much to file a lawsuit against that. They're queued up to do it, but they can't do it yet. And they may not be able to do it even after they start paying the taxes because of some research that's still in the process of being done about the viability of that claim. But believe me, I know nobody wants to pay it. I know retailers don't want to charge it. and we want to sue over them.
But is it one of those deals? It's kind of like the normal lawsuit. Until somebody's hurt by it, they don't have standing. Is that what happens?
Yeah, that's what the tax. Yes.
So unless somebody gets stung by having to pay the tax, there's nobody that has standing to sue over having gotten stung by paying the tax.
Basically,
is that how
yes.
it works? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that sucks, but it's kind of the way it works. So the bottom line is, for the average gun owner to know that if it's a restriction, it's in court or it's gonna be.
Yeah.
And what did you call it one day? A suapalooza.
Suapalooza, yeah.
It's a suapalooza.
Yeah, we have literally dozens of cases in action right now, more coming. That's CRPA only. And then across the country, there's 100 cases. So the Second Amendment Law Center is involved in amicus briefs in a lot of those cases across the country. CRPA is too, because if you win a case in Illinois, it helps you in California. So we're kind of reaching out everywhere to try and make sure that all the arguments that should be made are made.
All right, this costs money. And now we're kind of wrapped up. I'm going to do a shameless plug for CRPA and the Second Amendment Law Center. This costs money. It costs a lot of money to do. If you're not a member of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, shame on you. You should be. If you're in the state of California, join. If you're not in the state of California, you got to fight the battle where the battle is, and the battle is in these very restrictive states. So I don't care if you're in the free state of Arizona or you're in Texas or Tennessee or wherever. Join CRPA. They need your help. I'll put a link in the description where you can do that. I'll also put a link for the Second Amendment Law Center, which is Chuck's group, and he is also the volunteer president of CRPA. So either way, it helps a ton. Please do that. Is there anything we haven't talked about?
There are no, people should have faith. There are no financial shenanigans being played at CRPA. We have an audit committee that actually takes its job seriously. We have a finance committee. We have everybody on the board asks questions about where money is being spent. I don't charge for my time. So,
by the way, I've known Chuck for a long time. Today, at this point, Chuck, all these years I've known you, I've never seen you wear a $20,000 suit.
Yeah, I don't wear suits at all.
I know.
I don't want to channel John Fetterman, but I'm kind of more comfortable in Carhartt.
I get it. I get it. All right, Chuck. Is there anything else we should talk about we haven't talked about yet?
We're good. This will get us through till next Monday, brother.
All right, let's talk. Let's talk on Monday. Have a great week, brother. Thanks for coming on.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you again for watching the entire interview. I'm very, very grateful that you did. Please do, again, follow me. I'm going to remind you now. I've said it a couple of times during the interview. X, Rumble. Those are the places that do not censor me. There are links in the description. Also, there's a link in the description for the Second Amendment Law Center and a link in the description for CRPA where you can join. Please join. If you'd like to help out and help me keep the lights on for Gun Guy TV crew, you can do that by going to GunGuyTVcrew.org and or go to Patreon and Locals. I don't make a living on YouTube, so this costs me more money than I make. Any help I can get from you will help me keep this going. Have a great week. Thank you very much for all of your support, and wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.